Temporal Forces tournaments are in full swing over at play.limitlesstcg.com. So today we're going to just review the top 16 and top 8 deck lists from a few of the bigger play.limitlesstcg.com tournaments since PTCG Live added Temporal Forces and rotated the format. So we're going to start with the Late Night 179, which was played on March 27th and had 268 players in it. We'll look at the top 16 for this one. This tournament had a phase 1 and a phase 2 and then a top 8 cut. So pretty good validity for the results. We'll start at 16th place with an Arceus deck here. And this Arceus deck is using Aerodactyl V-Star. It's also using the new Relicanth with a Memory Dive, which allows all of your evolved Pokemon to use attacks from their previous evolutions. So this is actually really cool because it lets Aerodactyl V-Star use Aerodactyl V's attack Rock Crush 120 and discard an energy from your opponent's active Pokemon. So that could be really, really good against something like against Charizard EX. So let's say we Crushing Hammer one of their energies and then you use Aerodactyl V's attack to discard another one of their energies. They might not be able to attack next turn. Aerodactyl V-Star, though, is a card we've seen included in Arceus decks in the past because of the Ancient Star V-Star power attack. Until this Pokemon leaves play, it gains an ability that has the effect your opponent's Pokemon V in play, except any Aerodactyl V-Star, have no abilities. This deck is also playing one Salvatore, which allows you to search your deck for a card that has no abilities and evolve it from one of your Pokemon. So Aerodactyl V-Star does not have abilities until it uses that Ancient Star attack. So this is good against Lugia because it completely shuts down their deck. They can't use Summoning Star. And it's also good against opposing Arceus decks. They won't be able to use their Starburst. And not to even mention, the Aerodactyl V-Star swings for 240, 220 with a DTE. So that's going to be good against anything weak to fighting. When you're not using the Rock Crush attack to discard energies thanks to the Relicanth. So this is actually a really, really neat deck. I'd like to see a little bit more experimentation with this. I think this has some legs to actually do something. It's a really neat rendition of Arceus Bibarel in the new format. Moving on, in 15th place, we have a Lugia deck. Now, we're not going to look at every single meta deck that comes up, but this one is not your typical Lugia deck. Okay, so first, they are playing the Bad Minccino. It doesn't have Call for Family. Discard up to 2 Pokemon tools from your opponent's Pokemon. That's probably not going to matter very frequently. Just play the Call for Family Minccino instead. But this deck is also, interestingly enough, playing a 1/1 line of Espathra EX and 2 basic Psychic Energies. So Espathra EX, actually this is not the last you'll be seeing of Espathra in this video. It'll be popping up in another deck as well. Has the ability Dazzling Gaze. As long as this Pokemon's in the active spot, attacks used by your opponent's active Pokemon cost 1 more. And then Psyball does 30 plus 30 more for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. So you have to manually attach your basic Psychic to Espathra, but then you can search your deck for all of your special energies with Primal Turbo and pile them onto Espathra and do a lot of damage. I suppose that this is being played as an answer to Charizard EX, but Cinccino can also one-shot Charizard EXs, so I don't actually think this Espathra here is good. You're just adding something unnecessary to a really, really good deck already. So yeah, I definitely don't think Espathra EX is necessary at all in Lugia, and I would advise against it. Next, we have Christian Fontenot with Chien-Pao. Christian's a regional champion this season. Let's see what he's doing with Chien-Pao. So we've got the 3 Chien-Pao, we've got the 302 Bax line, we got the 2-2 Bibarel line. I've been playing a 3-3 Bibarel line in my Chien-Pao list currently, but I'm not exactly a C-Pal demon, so my opinion on Chien-Pao might not matter as much, but I've been liking 3-3 Bibarel. They got the 4 to 1 boss, 1 Cypher Maniac. Again, I'm playing 2 Cypher Maniacs. I really, really like that card. It's an incredible card and especially really, really good in here. But yeah, nothing Nothing really out of the ordinary in Christian's Chien Pao list here that he got top 16 with. Next, we've got a Turbo Hands deck. This is another one that we're probably going to see several of that look all the same. This one's actually not playing any gift energies, which is, in my opinion, just incorrect, because gift energies is going to be like one of the best ways to draw cards in this deck, but maybe that's also because the player was anticipating more Temple of Sinnoh showing up, and maybe they thought that their gift energies wouldn't be getting a lot of value, but I think gift energy is really, really good in this deck. I also do think that it's worth running a Psychic Energy so you can attack with Miraidon's Sparking Strike attack. So the Psychic Energy definitely makes sense to me there. Moving on. Next, we've got a Lost Zone Giratina. So this is not playing Iron Leaves, and it's only playing a 3-2 line of Giratina V-Star. I don't know what they're thinking. It's also only playing 3 Jet Energies. We're not even going to really look at this list too much because this is not a good Lost Zone Giratina list, so we'll be moving on pretty quickly from that on to the 11th place Espather EX deck. What? Espather EX, and also Caesar, and also Xatu. So Espather EX, we already talked about what that does. It makes your opponent's attacks cost more energy, and then it also scales its own attack by the amount of energy on Espather and the opposing Pokemon. Different here is they're playing a 2-2 line of Caesar. Was it 2-2? Yeah, 2-2 line of Caesar with the Punishing Scissors attack. This attack does 50 more damage for each of your opponent's Pokemon in play that has an ability. So yeah, this could definitely go up to 200, 250 damage pretty easily, and it's a single prize Pokemon, so not too bad, except you are playing a little bit of an awkward energy count here, 7 Psychic, 3 Metal, when in a Xatu deck, which this is, I guess it's kind of a Xatu deck, the Clairvoyant Sense, you want to have all Psychic energies in your deck because you're going to get to accelerate energies, and this is also going to be one of the ways that you draw cards with this deck. And I think now is as good a time of any to mention that we're very, very early in the format, and these are online events. So while, you know, I think the top 8, the very high placements here, have a lot of validity. The top 16, top 32s might even have some validity to them. But like this Espather deck, the Lugia deck with Espather EX in it, I don't expect those kinds of decks to be getting these kinds of finishes at major in real life events. So we're still early. People are trying out some fun stuff. The meta is nowhere even close to being like developed fully. The metagame has just started developing, really. So yeah, just wanted to put that disclaimer out there. We've got 2 more Turbo Hands decks. We'll just look at the higher placing one here at 9th place. This one does have some cool techs in it, though. It's still kind of Turbo Hands because they've got the 4 electric generator, but definitely a lower energy count here, and they're also spreading energy to grass and fighting and 1 luminous energy, which I think luminous energy works really, really well here. Since they're trying to just play the 2 grass for Iron Leaves and the 1 fighting for Iron Boulder, but then if any of those get prized, then your Leaves and your Boulder are just unusable, so the Luminous Energy definitely helps there, and the Luminous Energy can also provide a Psychic Energy for your Miraidon, so I think that was really intuitive deck building on their part there, putting in the Luminous Energy. The Iron Boulder EX, that might be a card that not everybody knows what it does. It has the Repulsor Axe attack for 2 energy. It does 60 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, if this Pokemon is damaged by an attack, put 8 damage counters on the attacking Pokemon. So this is nice because Iron Boulder has high HP, 240. You attach a booster energy capsule to it and then maybe have 3 Iron Crowns on the board, and your Repulsor Axe attack is now doing 140 damage, and then they're taking 8 more damage if they swing into the Iron Boulder, so it actually does some pretty decent damage, has a pretty decent threat for swinging into it, and at the very least it'll set up something to be KO'd by an Ampy very much later on. So yeah, the Iron Boulder's interesting. I like the inclusion of Luminous Energy to kind of smooth out the lower energy counts for fighting and grass, make those Pokemon still usable if one of these energies are prized. But I think Turbo Hands is probably just better off being Turbo Hands and running a lot of lightning energies and just trying to swing with Ampy very much. Moving on to the top 8, we've got a Charizard list, but I'm just gonna let's see, is this Bibarel or okay? If it was just Pidgeot, I was gonna just skip to the first place Pidgeot, but it is Bibarel, so we're definitely gonna take a look at this. Charizard, Bibarel, top 8. They're playing the Delphox V. The Delphox V can be good against a multitude of things. It can be good against something like Chien-Pao, where they have Frigibaxes to snipe. It could be good against an opposing Charizard deck, where you want to knock out like Charmander, or Pidgey. It could also be good against Lugia, where you want to knock out 2 Cinchinos at one time, the Cinchino in the active and the Cinchino on the bench. So the Delphox V definitely has potential, and you see they're running the higher energy count of 8 here, because if you do use Delphox V, you're sending energies to the Lost Zone, so accounting for that with the higher energy count. And also playing 2 Charmeleons, one with Fire Blast that does 90 damage, one with Combustion, but also with the Flare Veil ability that prevents all effects done to that Pokemon. So the Charmeleon with Flare Veil can't be devolved, it can't be Lost Mind, things like that. Next, in 7th place, we have a Lost Zone box deck using Radiant Charizard, and I really like this, and we'll talk more about it in for the next late night event, because this deck archetype does pop up again. But I really like this. I was already thinking about, you know, trying a Sablezard style of deck, but that plays Max Mirage Gate, and then I was thinking doing Roaring Moon and Iron Hands, but it looks like Roaring Moon, maybe it's not as needed if you have Radiant Charizard. You also have Mew EX that can copy some big attacks. And you also have the Crisis Punch that can do 280 damage for free if it's attached to a Cramorant or a Radiant Charizard. So even though you don't have the Roaring Moon in here, you do have some really, really big damage potential. And you're also seeming like you can focus on chipping things down with Cramorant and cleaning up with Iron Hands. Which is also nice. Now, the thing here I'd actually like to talk about is Spiritomb. So, Spiritomb, Fettered in Misfortune, basic Pokemon V in play have no abilities. This, it might seem like this was just going to be a useless card after Genesect V rotated, but if we think about some of the top decks, Charizard, Lugia, Stall, Charizard and Stall both use Rotom V very, very heavily in the early game, and Charizard and Lugia both use Lumineon. Now, they're not always going to need the Lumineon, but I'd say most games, Charizard and Stall / Control are going to be dropping that Rotom turn 1 and relying on it for drawing ability. So this Spiritomb can definitely shut that down if it comes down early. Then we have 6th place with an Ancient Box deck. So Ancient Box really going for the box here with one Great Tusk with Land Collapse, as well as a Slitherwing with Burning Turbulence. That Slitherwing with Burning Turbulence is going to be your best answer to Iron Hands. Knocks it out for just 2 fighting energy. Whereas the Great Tusk with Land, the Great Tusk with Land Collapse, that can get a sneaky like mill win condition if your opponent is not thinking that you have a way to mill them, or they just accidentally draw too many cards. If you ever see them with 4 cards or less in their deck, or maybe even like 5 cards, but they need a couple more turns to win, you can try Land Collapse and see if you either hit really good resources, or you could just deck them out. But the main focus of this deck is going to be attacking with Koraidon's Primordial Beatdown, doing a maximum of 180 damage for 2 energy, and Roaring Moon's Vengeance Fletching, which can actually get up to 200 plus as the game goes on and you rack up more ancient cards into your discard pile. Moving on, at 5th place, we have a Banette EX Gardevoir EX deck. So let's talk about this one. Banette EX, it might be surprising to see that there's no Salvatore in this deck list with the Banette EX. We're going for the Everlasting Darkness attack, but on turn 1 going second, you can also use Shuppet's Enveloping Shadow. 10, flip a coin of heads. Next turn, your opponent can't play item cards. So you do have that option on turn 1 as well. So yeah, Banette EX does 30 damage, and then during your opponent's next turn, they can't play item cards from their hand. You also have Poltergeist, of course, does 60 damage for each trainer card in your opponent's hand. So that Poltergeist can definitely do a ton of damage after you've been using Everlasting Darkness for a while. The goal here is if you can trap something in the active, that can't be switched out because you're Everlasting Darkness, trapping item cards, and you also have Calamitous Wasteland to make the retreat cost of each basic non-fighting Pokemon +1 more. You can just Everlasting Darkness every turn while you're using Radiant Alakazam's Painful Spoons to move that damage around, so you're not actually knocking out the Pokemon that you've put into the active position. And if the opponent is damaging your Banette EX, you can have Hero's Cape on it to bring it up to 350 health. It takes a hit, you Professor Tauros it, send out the next one, and you can just regenerate the energies as well with Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace if needed. You also have Gardevoir EX's Psychic Embrace to put energies onto Mew EX for genome hacking. You can use Screamtail's Roaring Scream. Now, Screamtail's Roaring Scream is going to be fantastic against decks like Lugia that has Archeops on the bench. Screamtail can one-shot an Archeops on the bench. It can also one-shot a Baxcalibur on the bench. So the Screamtail, if your opponent's able to get those Pokemon set up, the Screamtail is going to be great at neutralizing those threats for you. Next, we've got a 4th place Gardevoir deck. So Gardevoir EX technically at 4th and 5th place here in the late night 179. Gardevoir EX, this is a pretty typical build for post-rotation Guardy here. We've got Drifloon and Screamtail as attackers. Frequently, we'll see Mimikyu as well, but no Mimikyu here in this one. And then we've got the Bravery Charm, the Hero's Cape, and the Luxurious Cape. Those are all going to be raising the HP of Screamtail and Drifloon so that you can put more energies and thus more damage on them, making their attacks do a lot more damage. And we'll also see here that this is an Arven engine deck, so they're going to be trying to go second, use Arven for Technical Machine Evolution, and then start evolving your Kirlias that way, because the Kirlia Refinement is going to be the draw engine of the deck. And as we know, the Mirage Step Kirlia has rotated, so you really do need to go with the Technical Machine Evolution route, or go for like yeah, it's pretty much just Technical Machine Evolution route, or I guess you can just go first and then evolve naturally on turn 2. But this deck is definitely going for the go second, TM Evolution, get some Kirlias down, continue evolving everything and setting up, and then get to start attacking on turn 2 if you went second with the TM Evolution. So Gardevoir definitely isn't dead, but I also don't think it's nearly as good as it used to be. It's almost a different deck at this point. You're just kind of setting up and then using your Screamtails and Drifloons and hoping their tools don't get lost vacuumed. Definitely feels different in strategy and gameplay loop and everything compared to the pre-rotation Guardy, but still pretty strong, just not crazy good like it was. Then we've got 2 Giratina lists here at 3rd and 2nd place. So the first one we'll see here is playing Iron Leaves, and they're also playing the Ditto that can switch into another Pokemon from your deck if it's in the active position. Now let's go to the 2nd place, see if there's anything really different between the two. So this one's playing Spiritomb instead of Ditto. We'll look at the 2nd place one that placed higher. This Giratina V-Star Lost Zone deck, definitely better than the other one that we had looked at. I completely agree with the one Artisan, one Temple of Sinnoh. You want that Temple of Sinnoh to turn off Mist Energy and V-Guard energy. Prime Catcher's the best ace spec for this deck for sure. Spiritomb is good for the reasons I was stating earlier. It's good against Stall, it's good against Charizard, sometimes it's even good against Lugia. And then, of course, you've got the Iron Leaves with the Rapid Vernier ability to move energies to it, and then you can one-shot a Charizard EX with its attack. So definitely want to be playing the Iron Leaves in here because you need some way to neutralize Charizard other than just start Requiem. And then finally, we've got 1st place Charizard Pidgeot for the late night 179. So let's see. We've got Charizard Pidgeot with the Professor Tauros scenario and Palpad. I definitely like the Professor Tauros scenario. The Palpad, I'm a little torn on. Like, I really would just like to have a 4th Arven, or 4th Iono, probably 4th Arven for early game consistency. We also see that they're playing 2 Rotom and no Lumineon, which makes me dislike the only 3 Arven even more, because I really want to be playing Arven turn 1. But the Palpad also, in theory, Pal Pad plus Toro makes you have a better stall slash control matchup, but the Pal Pad can just be yoinked by Ares or Misfortune Sisters. So, like, I don't even love the Pal Pad too much. The Professor Toro scenario, definitely valid. I like it. I have it in my current Charizard Pidgeot list because it's not only good against stall and control, it can also just remove a Rotom or a Lumineon from your board, or it can pick up a damaged Charizard. So, it has other uses, which is why I like the Professor Toros. The Pal Pad, I'm not completely sold on, though. So overall, looking at the late night 179 placements here in the top 16, the Bennett EX deck, definitely a little out of the ordinary. But if we look at the matchups, it looks like they just straight up farmed Iron Hands decks. So they played against 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Future Hands decks, and they beat all of them. So that seems like a great matchup for this deck. And then let's see, they also played against 1, 2, 3, 4 Charizard decks. They went 2-1-1 against Charizard, so that's a pretty great record. Looks like Lost Zone Giratina was a struggle for them, ended up losing to that in the top 8 cut. I'd also like to look at the Gardevoir EX's matchups. They had 3 losses, so they were able to, let's see, they lost to an Ancient Box, a Charizard, and a Charizard. They were able to beat a Lugia. They were able to beat multiple Future Hands decks, Chien-Pao. So the Gardevoir, yeah, Gardevoir did pretty well there. And let's see what else we want to look at for matchup purposes. We could also just check out the first place Charizard list, see what they came up against. So they lost to a Lost Zone box deck, Edwin T, who 5-1 dropped. Looking pretty typical here. Lost Zone playing the four energy typings. Lost to Lost Zone Giratina and the Lost Zone box. So they only lost twice to first place Charizard. And then 2 ties, which definitely could have been IDs because they were both in last rounds, to Charizard and Bennett EX. So yeah, not a surprise seeing Charizard EX come out on top. Also not a surprise seeing Giratina Lost Zone still doing well. I don't think it's one of the best decks anymore, but it's definitely still good. Gardevoir EX, I definitely don't think it's one of the best decks anymore. It's a different deck now. It's solid. The Bennett EX is definitely a surprise, but it looks like they were able to farm a very good matchup in this tournament. Ancient Box is like Ancient Box is not that bad, but at the same time I think it's very underwhelming, and I think it like almost always rather play Lost Zone Box instead of Ancient Box, but the thing is that Ancient Box has a good Lost Zone matchup. So actually, let's look at the Ancient Box matchups here. So they lost to Future Hands, they lost to Charizard, they lost to Charizard, they lost to Charizard. Okay, so they went 0-3 versus Charizard. That's not great. Let's see. Yeah, it honestly looks like they didn't even have that competitive of a tournament run potentially. I mean, they did beat this Lost Zone box, Shun Takahashi, the Radiant Charizard Lost Box, but like I said, Lost Box is going to be a good matchup for Ancient Box. They beat a Stall. That's typically going to be good for Ancient Box if they can keep like the Radiant Greninja off of the board. Yeah, I'm not too impressed by Ancient Box. Let's move on to the late night 180. Now, I think we'll look at less decks here because a lot of these are going to be duplicate decks that we just already looked at. So let's start with 15th place Snorlax Stall. We've got 15th place Snorlax Stall here. This tournament had over 300 people, so it was a little larger. Maybe makes the results a little more valid. This list is playing a Radiant Charizard and 2 Fire Energy. Now, most lists are already playing the Fire Energy for Chi-Yu's Jealousy Singe. That's going to be your new attack to mill thing since Crabominable V rotated. But the Radiant Charizard is going to be able to clear threats off the board with Combustion Blast. So, like against Lost Zone Giratina, for example, or even Arceus Tina, they're probably just going to try to set up 2 Tinas and shred. And just, you know, and then when the time comes, they can Lost Impact. But if they go down to 2 prizes, then you can Combustion Blast, and then they'll probably respond by evolving a Giratina V-Star and Lost Impacting it, so you can't just Super Rod the Charizard back and then knock out their only Giratina V remaining, because Radiant Charizard does not KO a Giratina V-Star. But if they do that, then you could always just go into Mimikyu, but then that also runs the issue of they can just Star Requiem to Mimikyu. So I don't know that I really love the one Radiant Charizard here. I guess it can catch people off guard, but it's an open deck list format here on online events, so I'm not a huge fan of the Radiant Charizard in the stall list. Now, if this was a control deck, that would be a completely different story because you'd have more attackers than just the Radiant Charizard. I think stall is really strong, though, regardless of what your list looks like. It's just going to be a strong archetype. We do have an Arceus Giratina here, and I don't believe we looked at any Arceus Giratina at the last tournament. Looking like a pretty standard build. In my current list, I have been practicing, or, I have like most archetypes built at home right now just to practice against a lot, even if I don't want to play the deck. Arceus Giratina definitely falls into that category of a deck I have built, but I don't plan on playing to an event. But this is looking really, really, really similar to the list I have built. I just have a Pokemon League headquarters in place of the Lost City, but like Lost City's also good. Yeah, this is just a really solid beatdown deck that has Eri now. Like, I love Eri. Eri is, like, the main reason I would even consider maybe playing Arceus Giratina. Eri's just really, really strong. Turn 2, you grab your DTE and an Eri with Starbirth, and maybe you just win the game by, like, ditching 2 rare candies out of your opponent's hand, or double Mirage Gate, or something crazy like that. I think Eri just has so much potential. Really, really strong card. Let's move on up to 8th place, All Out Blitzel. So All Out Blitzel has been playing events with their very own version of Pidgeot control. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but this is super interesting. So the most unique thing about this list is the Wigglytuff and the Cloth. So let's look at Wigglytuff. Wigglytuff got a lot better when Path to the Peak rotated, because it has the expanding body ability. If this Pokemon has any special energy attached, it gets plus 100 health. So that brings it up to 350. And then with a Hero's Cape, that brings it all the way up to 450. So not many things are going to be knocking out a Wigglytuff EX under these conditions. So Wigglytuff EX can tank just about anything with the 450 health. You get a Mist Energy, so it can't get Frenzied Gouging or Star Requiemed as well. So that Wigglytuff EX is just going to act as a wall, but you can also use it to, like, knock things out, right? So Friend Tackle, if you have a DTE and another energy on, Friend Tackle is going to do 160 if you played a supporter card, and you have 450 health. So you can two-shot anything, and they're going to be forced to, at minimum, two-shot you. Probably more than two-shot because you have a crazy amount of health, but you can also use Charon's Care to pick up the Wigglytuff and heal it. You can attach Defiance Vest instead of Hero's Cape. If they're doing smaller amounts of damage, you can bring that chip damage down even more with Defiance Vest. And then the next card to talk about here is going to be Cloth EX. If this Pokemon's in the active and is damaged by an attack, discard an energy from the attacking Pokemon. So that ability is kind of crazy when you pair it with having a Hero's Cape on. So Cloth will have 320 health with the Hero's Cape. So if your opponent can't one-shot the Cloth and they're stuck swinging into the Cloth, they discard an energy attached to them, you penny the Cloth, send out Pidgeot, put the Cloth and the Hero's Cape back down, put Cloth back out, and they have to attack it again, and they're going to lose an energy again for doing it. So I really, really like this Cloth, actually. Bouffalant isn't like a new card. Bouffalant, Giovanni's Charisma is a combo that's been on my mind ever since I started testing post-rotation, because Giovanni's forces an energy back to your opponent's hand, maybe missed energy even, while also accelerating an energy for you. So you can put Bouffalant into the active, attach an energy, Giovanni's a double turbo energy down to it, remove an energy from your opponent, and then you get the Lost Headbutt, put in another energy from your opponent's Pokemon removed, but this time it's getting sent to the Lost Zone. So this can be like this could be devastating versus, let's say, Charizard. You Giovanni's one of their fire energies to their hand, and then you Lost Headbutt, sending the other one to the Lost Zone. Like, you do that a couple times and the game is just over. So this is a really, really cool control deck. The problem with this is Peonia rotated, and this list isn't playing Daisy's Help plus Arc Phone. So things like the 1 Bouffalant, the 1/1 Wigglytuff, you do have a heavy ball here, but you can't get everything with heavy ball. So, like, let's say your Wigglytuff's prize, there's no way to get that out of the prizes. Let's say your 1 fighting energy for Cloth, because Cloth can attack. is prized, you have no way to get that, or your Giovanni's Charisma, your one Charon's Care, your one Hero's Cape. So a lot of one-ofs with no way to get them out of the prizes except for taking prizes. So I think I'd like to see a Daisy's Help in here. You just look at your prizes, write down where they are, and then you can take prizes and get the cards out that you need. So that's my note here, is that I think you need a Daisy's Help, or maybe just thin out the techs and then bump up some other counts. I know I saw that All Out Blitzel added a second Wigglytuff to their list for a different tournament, so I think that makes a lot of sense. Play one Jigglypuff, two Wigglytuff, because you can always get Jigglypuff with Heavy Ball, but you can't get Wigglytuff with it. So yeah, really awesome control deck here from All Out Blitzel. Then we got a Chien Pal. This one is, we're just going to look for any differences from the Chien Pal lists we've already looked at. So this one does have Canceling Cologne. I want to say, oh no, the other one definitely had Canceling Cologne. It didn't have Counter Catcher though. So this one does have Counter Catcher. It also has Kyogre. So Kyogre with Dynamic Wave, put 3 energy attach this Pokemon into your hand, then you do 180 to one of your opponent's Pokemon. I think this was better in pre-rotation because like the Miraidons were playing Squawkabilly, the Roaring Moon's playing Squawkabilly. There was more bench sitters that you wanted to hit, I think. So I'm not as big of a fan of this now, but maybe I could be swayed into the direction of Kyogre being good. Right now, it just seems like a really awful starting Pokemon. Why not take a look at a Lugia real quick? This looks like it's just being built. Yeah, this just looks like Champions League copy paste, and I'm fine with that. Oh no, it's not Champions League copy paste. They're playing less Serena, but I don't think there's really many changes that need to be made to Lugia Archeops. Now we do have a third place. Hold on to your seats here. Third place Raging Bolt Sandy Shocks. It's playing a Raikou, it's playing a Forest Seal Stone, it's playing one Slitherwing. I did actually mess around with this deck a little bit, and it's great at knocking out multi-prizers. It's awful at knocking out single prizers. That's the problem, is that you're at a disadvantage against single prizers. Also, this takes like a pretty awful stall and control matchup, I believe, because your only answer to Mimikyu is Slitherwing, and Slitherwing will eventually knock itself out, or they can just Lost City the Slitherwing. Other than that, you have no way around Mimikyu. So this should have a pretty horrible time against stall and control. And it should also probably not be that great against single prize decks. And also, kind of like comparing it to Roaring Moon EX from pre-rotation, it doesn't have as much early game like kind of burst potential, turn one going second, because it just needs more energy on the board to be doing the things you want to do. Like turn one, if you attach for turn and then Professor Sada's, you're only doing 210, which I know only 210, but it's just not as impressive as Roaring Moon was. So while this deck is like solid and fun, I don't think it's a top tier deck, but congrats to this person for getting third place with it. Then we have Charizard Pidgeot. I do think Charizard Pidgeot is just better than Charizard Bibarel. They're playing Chi-Yu EX to help against stall mill control, to, you know, counter mill the mill deck, kind of. We also see the Professor Tauros and the Pal Pad here, so maybe the Pal Pad is just going to become the norm. Like I said, I wasn't too big of a fan of the Pal Pad for a couple of reasons, but I see where people are going with it for sure. And also double Rotom again instead of Rotom Lumineon. That's interesting to see a couple times in a row with Charizard Pidgeot lists. And then we have this Lost Zone Radiant Charizard list. Definitely excited to talk about this one because I think it's really good. I alluded to that a little earlier, that we would be talking about one of these kinds of deck lists. We got that Spiritomb in there like I was talking about. I think Spiritomb's a really intuitive tech right now because Charizard's a top deck, Lugia is a top deck, Stall and Control are top decks, and there's V Pokemon that you want to turn off abilities there. I think this is a nice spin on Lost Zone box instead of playing the Radiant Greninja. Like, if the decks that you want to Radiant Greninja are already playing Manaphy, a lot of times that Radiant Greninja turns into just draw support, and that's not a bad thing. Like, the main thing you're going to miss from Radiant Greninja is not Moonlight Shuriken, it's going to be the concealed cards, the extra draw support. But I have played around with this deck, and it does function. I think this is a pretty strong deck, and I think Radiant Charizard is always super strong, especially when you're playing 4 Mirage Gate, and so you can just start attacking with a single prize Pokemon that's swinging 250 a lot earlier than your opponents expect, and you have Iron Hands to take extra prizes. So yeah, this deck is definitely strong. Whether it's better than Radiant Greninja Lost Zone box, we'll have to wait and see. But this did get first place at the Late Night 180, over 300 participants. Let's see, it lost to a Chien-Pao, lost to a Lost Zone Tina, lost to a Lugia. In top 8, it beat Lugia, Raging Bolt, Charizard, beat a control deck. Yeah, not a bad spread of matchups there. And then I have one more tournament I wanted to look at here, the Ditto Forces 2. This had, let's see, this had 175 people in it. And there's a couple interesting decks to look at here. We have a deck that went 6-2 that I wanted to talk about. So 6-2, not exactly the most impressive record, but it is a Gouging Fire EX Iron Valiant EX deck. So kind of a spin from the old Iron Valiant Entei deck. Now we have Gouging Fire. Gouging Fire does do a ridiculous amount of damage. I want to note that. Blaze Blitz for 260 is pretty incredible. And then when you take into account the Iron Valiant, maybe you get 3 Iron Valiant Tachyon bit pings, then your Blaze Blitz is doing 260 plus the 60 damage of pings that you put down. The Moltres is definitely good. That can be your Mimikyu killer. Inferno Wings does 90 if you have a damage counter on it. You have Magma Basin. This deck is playing Radiant Greninja for draw support, which I do think makes sense, and I guess you don't need Radiant Charizard as much now that you have Gouging Fire that does a ridiculous amount of damage. So I actually like that they went with Radiant Greninja instead of just defaulting to Radiant Charizard, because your Gouging Fire EX does so much damage, and it has high health. The one thing maybe missing a little bit is Ancient Booster Capsule. I wonder if adding 60 health to Gouging Fire EX would help frequently. So that's something I would like to try. Then we have at 7th place, we have a Spite Ops EX deck. So Spite Ops EX, Trap Territory, your opponent's active Pokemon's retreat cost is 1 more, and you can have multiple of these in play at the same time, and then Wire Hang does more damage for the amount of retreat costs in your opponent's retreat cost. But the other thing that's cool here is the Venomoth. So Venomoth has the Perplexing Powder attack. It does 30. Your opponent's active is confused, and next turn your opponent can't play any item cards. So I'd be interested to see what matchups this person had with the Spite Ops deck. So in Swiss, they just lost to that Iron Valiant Gouging Fire list that we just looked at. That makes sense. They play a lot of switching, and they have Fire-type Pokemon. They're pretty supporter stadium based as well, so the item lock didn't hurt them too much. But they did get a win against Giratina Lost Zone, Charizard, Lost Zone Box, Future Hands, Lugia, Gardevoir. So they hit a pretty wide spread of stuff. And then I also skipped this Roaring Moon deck that went 6-1-1 but bubbled out of cut. I actually have a list that I've been playing a little bit that looks identical to this. Roaring Moon EX isn't dead. I'm not sure that it's... Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's not tier 1, but it could be like tier 2, tier 3 for sure. It's pretty solid. It can be fast. Prime Catcher, definitely a buff to this card. So like you can Professor Setas and Prime Catcher in the same turn and just like turn 1 Calamity Storm a Lugia V or an Arceus V or something crazy like that. I've done that plenty of times already in testing. So this archetype definitely has some legs, I think. Then we have Arceus Regidrago. So Arceus Regidrago V-Star with a Lone Vulpix V-Star as well. The Koraidon has a Shred attack, so that's why they're playing that. Giratina V-Star, obviously, for Lost Impact. Noivern EX, you can either prevent all damage done by basic Pokemon, so that could just wall out some decks, as well as Dominating Echo. Your opponent can't play Special Energy or Stadium cards. And then we have this Altaria EX, which they actually do play the... Oh, no, they don't play the Swablu. They play an Altaria and an Altaria EX. So the Altaria's attack that they can copy, Soothing Lullaby, does 110. Your opponent's active is now asleep, and they have to flip 2 coins to wake up. That doesn't seem great. And then Altaria EX, Light Pulse, 140. Prevent all effects of attacks used by your opponent's Pokemon done to this Pokemon. So it prevents effects next turn. Okay. I'm not a huge fan of these cards, but yeah, essentially Regidrago V-Star for Grass Fire can choose an attack from a dragon-type Pokemon in your discard and use that attack. And then they also have the 1/1 Vulpix V-Star in here. Snow Mirage, that's going to wall out any damage from Pokemon that have abilities. So that's going to wall out a lot of important Pokemon. Lugia V-Star, Charizard EX, Arceus V-Star, so on and so forth. I'm not too fond of this deck. It looks like a pile, but I'm sure there's an Arceus Regidrago fan watching this that will be happy to see the deck here. Here we have All Out Blitzel again. We won't spend too much time. It's the Wigglytuff control, but like I said, they added a second Wigglytuff EX, and that's like the main thing that I see changing here. So yeah, we won't spend any more time on that. Then we've got a Charizard EX. So we've got Charizard Pidgeot, 1 Rotom, no Lumineon, 2 Professor Tauros, really trying to not lose to Stalin Control. And then you also got 1 Technical Machine De-Evolution there. Then we have Ancient Box. This one's keeping it pretty simple. They still do have the 1 Great Tusk. Also playing the Awakening Drum Ace-Spec. Draw a card for each of your ancient Pokemon in strong item card, and it will count as an ancient card in your discard for Roaring Moon's Vengeance Fletching. Then we've got a Chien-Pao list here, the 3/3 B-Barrel. Like I said, I think 3/3 B-Barrel is strong. Iron Bundle's pretty good as well. The 2 Chien-Pao, 3 Super Rod, that's kind of like the cards that you go between. You either play 3 Chien-Pao 2 Rod or 2 Chien-Pao 3 Rod. Either's fine. I've been playing 3 Chien-Pao 2 Rod myself. And then first place here, we have a really interesting Roaring Moon deck. This one is playing a 3/3 line of the Dunsparce as their draw support. They're foregoing the Lumineon, the Squawkabilly, the Mew EX. None of that. It's all about this it's all about the Dunsparce. With the runaway draw ability. Once during your turn, you may draw 3 cards, and then you shuffle this Pokemon back into your deck. So, I guess that could even help against... Nah, that doesn't really help against Mill or Control or anything. I guess this can't be trapped, though, because it doesn't have to be on the bench. That's really, really nice. So this should actually have a great time versus Mill, Stall, Control, because the only thing they can trap is Radiant Greninja, and you have a penny to pick that up, so just trying to not let that Radiant Greninja hit the bench. And then you have Roaring Moon and Roaring Moon. So let's see what their matchups were here. They went 9-1-1. Only loss was to an Ancient Box. They didn't play against any Charizard. Beat a Chien-Pao. They beat Chien-Pao in the finals. They beat 2 Lugia. They did beat a Snorlax, Gardevoir. So yeah, again, these aren't sometimes these aren't the most competitive tournaments. It's not like playing through a full regionals or something like that, but it's still nice to see these placements and results and get some ideas for decks and see what decks are performing well. And what decks are surprising us, like the Roaring Moon decks, the Spite Ops decks, Wigglytuff EX. So let me know what you guys think about these results and what your favorite deck was that we looked at today. And let me know if I missed anything interesting along the way here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Celio's Network.